Hello everyone, this is Samuel Chang here for Joiner English, and today we are going to be looking at the second reading strategy lesson, or questions 21 to 40 on your diagnostic test. So this is ACT Prep Steps to Success Day 8. Again, this is Samuel Chang for Joiner English, and today we're going to be looking at questions 21 to 40. So if you haven't, heard some of the general strategy tips I went over, most definitely go back and listen to Day 7, or Reading Strategy Lesson 1. Near the end of that lesson, I went over a lot of interesting and effective, tricks and tips that you need to follow in order to succeed on the ACT. But today, we're just simply going to be going over another 20 questions. And obviously you can't ask questions virtually, but if you have any questions, feel free to email me. My information is on the homepage of Joiner English webpage. So today we're going to be looking at passages 3 and 4, and we're going to be doing this similarly to last time, and we're going to be doing this similar to last time, where I go over each question, because you have already done the diagnostic test and, kind of thought about, the questions, I'm sure, and the passages, and read over them. So this one's going to be a bit quick again, like relatively quick, the same as last time. And I won't spend too much time on each question, but just make sure you're listening to how I solve each question and the strategy I'm using to get the correct answer for all the questions. Okay, so let me talk a bit about passage 3 first. This is passage 3. Well, this and this is passage 3. There's two passages. You can see passage A and passage B. Why are there two passages, you ask me? Well, both of these are included inside of what ACT calls passage 3. And with passage 3, or whatever passage has two subpassages, you're going to be given 3 blocks of questions. Your first block of questions is going to ask you about passage A exclusively. Similarly, your second block of questions is going to ask about passage B only. And then the third block of questions is going to ask about both passages jointly. Now, you might think, well, how might I answer these most effectively? Because, if you're like me, every time you read another passage, you kind of forget the first one that you read. So what a lot of prep books recommend, and what I most definitely recommend, is you look at how many questions are in each of those blocks. And this one, if you look at your own test paper, you'll see that there are 5 questions on passage A, 2 questions on passage B, and 3 questions on both passages. So what most test books, and I myself recommend you to do, is find the passage that has the most number of questions exclusively on that passage. So in this one, because passage A has 5 questions, it would be passage A. And since passage A has the most number of questions, we're going to read passage A first in order to kind of stay more focused on, the passage A questions. And then you're going to read passage B, answer the passage B questions, and then hopefully you still recall some of passage A to go back and answer the joint ones. So let's read hopefully you read passage A first, but I'm not going to read again, obviously. But let's go ahead and get started with question 21. Remember, 21 to 25 I posted right here, or I printed it right here. Ask about passage A only. So that's why we're reading passage A first. Don't read both passages at once, right? Only read, the one, with the most number of questions, because you're not doing yourself good if you're reading all the passages, right? So you're doing yourself good, obviously, if you're reading, the one passage and not distracting yourself. Let's look at question 21. When Bradbury claims, "Thus I fell into surprise," in line 46, he's most nearly referring to thee. This gives you a line number, so we're fine. We don't have to fret about this. "Thus I fell into surprise. I came on the old and best ways of writing through ignorance and experiment, and was startled when truth leaped out of bushes like quail before gunshot." So what is this whole passage talking about? If you've read it, then you'll know, right? The whole passage is talking about how he's using a different method to write, fiction and to write his novels. And he's using a completely different thought process to get words out of his mind. And so what's the answer? Well, the secret to a creative outpouring was to use, a different method, a word association method to write fiction. You really didn't even need to know what a word association method is. You just need to know he's using a different method, right? This says, "Long forgotten experiences Well, he's talking to his childhood friends, but he is not, recalling long forgotten experiences to get better writing. Realization he's writing more effectively about his current than his past? No, I think it's opposite that. Several methods other writers taught him to help him write honest, authentic stories. Does he talk about methods other writers taught? Not extensively. He might have mentioned a few times, but not very much. 21 to 25 ask about passage A. Passage A indicates that Bradbury believes all beginning writers think that they can. Indicates. This is another one that, he doesn't explicitly state, but he kind of infers. He kind of thinks, well, if you're a writer, then you think this. At least a beginner writer. So what does it say? Well, it basically in the beginning of the passage in line 2 and 3, before that, like every beginner, I thought you could beat, pummel, and thrash an idea into existence. So, what's the answer? It's every beginner thinks they can force an idea into creation. Pretty simple. I don't need to go over the other ones because that one's obvious. 23. Bradbury's claim, I would then take arms against the word or for it, most strongly suggests that during his writing session, Bradbury would. Line 12. It says to weigh the word, well, reading after this quote, it says to weigh the word and show me its meaning in my own life. What's the answer? His meaning to his own life. What is that? What's one word for that? It's significance to him, right? That's one word for, that phrase right there. So that's the answer. Why are the other ones wrong? Well, the key to understanding John Huff? Not really. He's not attempting to find one word. Rejecting a word for not being a catalyst? No. He's not expecting words to be catalysts. Deliberately choose to write only about a word that inspired his fears? No, he's not afraid of the words he chooses. He probably eliminates, in fact, the ones he's afraid of. So, he feels as if he were struggling to find a word's significance to him. I believe that is the best answer choice right there. In the 7th paragraph of passage A, lines 30 to 37, Bradbury explains his habit over many years as a writer of almost daily. So what does 30 to 37 say? Well, 30 to 37 says, he strolled across a recollection of his grandparents' Illinois grass. So what's the answer? Is he driving past his grandmother's property? No, it says, is he strolling across a recollection? What is a recollection? I'm sorry. What is a recollection? Well, a recollection is, a memory, right? A memory of, his past, his grandparents' property, right? So that's the correct answer. Or that's not the correct answer. It's thinking about his grandparents' property. It's not actually driving. This is inferring that he's actually driving past his grandparents' property, but really it's saying, his recollection, which is kind of thinking about his grandparents' property. And the other two aren't really about his grandparents' property, so these two are the two that you should be looking at if you were ruling out two answers. Last question about Passage A. Passage A explains that when writing about the character John Huff, Bradbury had And it says in, this one's focusing on line 39 to 40 to 41 and 42, 39 to 42. I borrowed my friend John Huff from my childhood in Arizona and shipped him east to Greentown so I could say goodbye to him properly. So is his childhood friend actually being shipped over? No, he's probably not seen his childhood friend since his childhood. In his mind, it's kind of like the recollection of his grandparents' farm. His mind, he's moving John Huff to another location. So what's the answer? Well, he's moving John Huff to another town, so he's kind of, in his mind, he's imagining what would happen if John Huff had lived in that other town, right? Borrow John Huff to use as a minor character, those two words make it wrong, because John Huff is a major character in those stories. Included John in stories about a town in Arizona and in stories about Greentown. No, he's just moving John Huff to Greentown. He's not saying anything about Arizona. Placed John in Arizona? No. He moved John from Arizona to Greentown. He didn't place John in Arizona. So C is the correct answer. So Passage B. At this point, if you're not familiar with Passage B, I encourage you to pause the video and, read Passage B again, or at least familiarize yourself with Passage B. And these two questions are only about passage B, not about passage A. So in the first paragraph of passage B, 52 to 63, the narrator describes John Huff in a manner that, well, he's, kind of describing John Huff as a person that can leap from the sky like a chimpanzee, could live underwater 2 minutes, slide 50 yards downstream. Are these things regular people can do? No. It's saying John Huff is amazing, right? It's kind of idolizing John Huff. So it's either, right now it's either, we can go ahead and rule out H, because reckless behavior is not what he's saying, right? We can rule out H. But these other three kind of all work. The next one that, doesn't work is obviously F, because F says, to indicate John's view of himself. We're not looking at John's view of himself. We're looking at, the author's view of John, or the narrator's view of John. That's the next one we can rule out. But then we have two that are extremely tricky. Why are these two extremely tricky? Well, it basically, this first part of this one and this first part of this one are literally the same. Exaggerating his characteristics and showcasing his talents they're a different style of writing, but they're about the same, they're saying about the same thing. This one says to reflect Douglas's idolization, and this one is to make clear why both children and adults admire John. So we see, we have a question to ask ourselves. Did only Douglas admire John, or did everyone admire John? Well, correct answer is G, because only Douglas admired John. Right? It never gives an indication that everyone admired John. Question 27. Within passage B, the image in lines 74 to 76 functions figuratively to suggest that. So what does 74 to 76 say? 74 to 76 says, it was such a fine day, and then suddenly a cloud crossed the sky, covered the sun, and didn't move again. So this is talking about how the narrator felt when John when John announced his leaving, right? Because they were childhood friends. Douglas idolized John. So now John is leaving. We have to separate, and this passage is really, really hard on that, is we have to separate figurative language and literal language in this in this passage. Most of the literal things they say are figurative in these two passages. So it says it was a fine day, then a cloud crossed the sky. He writes it like a cloud actually crossed the sky on a sunny day, but that's not correct. A cloud didn't actually cross the sky on a sunny day. What actually happened was, it crossed the narrator's mind. The narrator got sad even though it was a great day. So John's leaving in a stormy night? No, it's not literally a stormy night. John's disappointment about moving was reflected in his mood. Was John disappointed with moving, or was the narrator sad about John moving? That's not right. The mood of the day changed dramatically and irreversibly once John shared his news. That is the correct answer. D says the sky in Greentown became cloudy at the moment John told Douglas he was moving. This is taking every word literally. Is this right? No, of course not. It's taking every word so literally. The sky literally became cloudy at the literal moment that John told Douglas he was moving. That's ridiculous, right? It's C. These three questions ask about both passages. Now, be careful not to confuse, the two passages' content, because they were both written by the same author, talking about the same person, more or less, and yeah, don't confuse them. It's very, very easy to confuse them. It says both passages highlight Bradbury's use of, and this is a really hard question. We have to find, each of these elements in both passages before we can circle them. So this is a process of elimination question. So do both passages use first-person omniscient? Does the second one use first-person omniscient? No, it says said Douglas and said John. So that's wrong. The passage B does not use first-person omniscient. Does either passage use satire and irony to develop characters? No, that doesn't show up. No. How about allegory? Does either one have a complex philosophical question? The only philosophically complex thing I saw in either passage was in passage A, when he's talking about his new word development strategy. No. There's nothing about, allegory. That's not right. So the answer becomes J, sensory details and imaginative descriptions to convey ideas. So a lot of authors use this, which makes this a really good answer, because, it shows up in both passages, probably just by virtue of the author, writing in his own style. Sensory details and imaginative description to convey ideas. Well, we see a lot of sensory details. Like in the first one, you'll see a half-burnt firecracker, a rusted toy, a fragment of letter. In the second passage, you'll see, a yellow-green train ticket, and you'll see the cloud crossing the sky, covering the sun. Obviously sensory details, and especially imaginative descriptions, figurative language, right? That's very important, and that's the obvious answer. That one's a bit confusing, but here's an even worse one. Number 29. Based on Bradbury's description in passage A of his writing process, which of the following methods hypothetically depicts a way Bradbury might have begun to write the story in passage B? How might Bradbury have begun to write the story in passage B? Well, assuming he used the same word association method he advertised in passage A to write passage B, what might he have done? That's basically what this question is saying. Well, it's pretty easy. In the word association method, he wrote down, something that came across his mind, and he, associated a lot of words with it and wrote down all those words that he associated. So what's the answer? Well, it's obviously C, because he's writing down, the words train ticket, and then spending an hour writing whatever those words brought to his mind. That's the word association method, an example of it. That's like, a textbook example of a word association method. Taking notes while interviewing old friends? No, it never says he interviewed old friends. Forming two characters? Never said he formed characters first. Outlining the plot of a story? Does he outline the plot of a story first? It's a word association method, not a plot association method. So, just, with a title word association method, you get the words train ticket. And then you write down whatever comes to his mind, right? So sometimes you have to infer stuff, and sometimes, in questions like this, you have to relate, information given in both passages. Even if they're explicitly given in both passages, it's still a little bit hard to relate them. 30. Elsewhere in the essay from which passage A is adapted, Bradbury writes, "Was there a real boy named John Huff? There was, and that was truly his name, but he didn't go away from me. I went away from him." This one's super, super hard, okay? If you got this one right, congratulate yourself, pat yourself on the back, and, give yourself a piece of chocolate or something, because this one's super hard. Elsewhere in the essay from which passage A is adapted, Bradbury writes this, right? Was there a real boy? There was. He didn't go away from me. I went away from him. So what does passage A reveal, first of all? Well, passage A reveals that, passage B reveals that, he idolized John Huff. He really loved John Huff, and when John Huff went away, he was really sad. Talking about the narrator here. And now the narrator kind of reverses that. He's saying John Huff didn't go away from me, I went away from him. So what is, what is the answer to this question? Obviously, he's not telling the truth, right? So let's look at all the answer choices. They reveal that Bradbury believed that to surprise readers is a fiction writer's most important task. No, he's lying. He's not surprising readers. They reinforce that Bradbury uses his life experiences to create fiction, but also altered those experiences as he pleased. Notice the two sections here. Split right here. First section, use his life experiences to create fiction, associates with there was a boy named John Huff. Second one, but also alter these experiences as he pleased, is this part right here. You have to know from the passage that, you have to know from the passage that he's telling a lie, or you can't prove that this second part of the answer is true. So that's the correct answer. But you have to know the passage so well that you know the second part circled is a lie. so that you can know that he altered experiences. The rest of these, Bradbury felt such pain that he had to reverse events. That's going a bit far. He didn't feel such pain he had to reverse events to write the story. That's going a bit far. I'm sorry. Jay says they indicate that Bradbury rarely used his life experiences. No, he did. There was a boy named John Huff. Jay is incorrect. Looking at the last passage, this is a science passage, and I forgot to mention this, but there are 4, passage types, and they highlight this right here in the passage. It's in all caps and bold in each passage, and these 4 passage types always stay the same, no matter what reading test you're doing, 2016, 2017, any ACT reading test. There are 4 different types of reading passages, and they're always in the same order. Passage 1 is always prose fiction, passage 2 is always social science, passage 3 is always humanities, and passage 4 is always natural science. Now, you might say, well, is the double passage, like the double, the 2 passage always in the same, type? No. Sometimes it ends up in natural science, sometimes it ends up in humanities, sometimes it ends up, in any of, it could end up at any of, the passages. It could end up in passage 1, passage 2, 3, or 4. But, both of those are going to be similar passages, and they're both going to be about the same topic if they end up in the same, passage. Just know that. But here's our 4th passage, natural science. Hopefully you've read this. I'm not going to go over it. Again, pause the video here if you need to go over the passage again. Question 31. The primary purpose of the passage is to. This is the broadest question you'll ever see on the ACT. The primary purpose. You might ask the ACT writers, well, the primary purpose, aren't there a lot of those? Yeah, there are a lot of those, but the ACT writers are trying to get you to choose the most obvious one. Primary purpose of the passage is to, well, think about it. What is the passage doing? There's a bunch of ants. Is the passage comparing the jaws to jaws of another species? It might have said one sentence about that, but that's definitely not the primary purpose. Are they analyzing a specific scientific studies techniques? No, they're not. They might have mentioned it, but that's not the main purpose. I'm going to say this a lot of times. They might have mentioned it, but that's not the main purpose. That's what I'm going to say a lot of times, because that is really important. Describe the evolution of the ability to perform an escape jump. The evolution? Are they talking about the evolution? No. So what's the answer? It's obviously A. The evolution of the ability to perform an escape jump is, something they might have mentioned, but that's not the main purpose. Again, all 3 of these they might have mentioned, or they wouldn't put them in the answer choices, because they want to make the answer choices tricky. But that's not the main purpose. You have to know what the main purpose is. The sentence in lines 73 to 75, ooh, here's another, textual reference with numbers. I love these. So what does 73 to 75 say? In the wild, gangs of defending ants team up to attack hostile strangers, sending them head over heels out of the nest. Okay. So I think they're focusing on the phrase head over heels. Because this is a scientific article. Why is it using head over heels? Well, example of the author's rhetorical technique of... So what is happening here? Is the author using sarcasm? No, head over heels is not sarcasm. It's just, a bit lighter, right? A lighthearted tone into a technical article? Yeah, that sounds right. A slightly combative tone into an article that praises 2 scientists' work? Let's look at this second section right here, which is wrong already. We don't have to... Oh, the first section is not wrong, but the second one is. So this brings me to a strategy point right here. So scientists... this brings me to a strategy point that, if there are 2 sections to one answer choice on the ACT reading test, if there are 2 sections to one answer choice, and any one of those sections is wrong, even in the least, even if there are 3 or 4 sections, if any one of those sections is wrong, the whole answer is wrong. And they might trick you by making the other, 3 sections right and 1 wrong, but if one's wrong, the answer is wrong. So if the second section is wrong, the answer is wrong, even if the first section is right. Incorporating personal anecdotes. Is the phrase head over heels a personal anecdote? No. A personal anecdote is, a personal story. It's not right. So they are interjecting a lighthearted tone. That's the correct answer. Let's go a bit faster. As it is used in lines 81 to 82, well, here's another, really easy question because it gives you a line number. 81 and 82 says, storing energy in their jaws to penetrate well-defended prey. So what is well-defended prey? Well, prey that, might have, a hard outer shell, maybe. Well-defended prey, well, they're using these jaws, and these jaws hurt, but it's saying, well, the only reason they have to have these jaws is because, a lot of prey has a hard outer shell, so these jaws can't really affect those prey, but that's why their jaws became so, so advanced, evolved to be so advanced, because they refer to prey that has a hard outer shell, that they have to defeat. Lethal bites, attacking groups, move quickly. All of these are characteristics of the ants. This is really tricky too. These are characteristics of the ants, not of the prey. The passage makes clear that the main source of the speed of the jaws of the trapjaw ant is the... So, here's another... remember when I said in day 7 how there are questions that they designed to waste your time, just, looking through the text trying to find details? Well, this is one of them. I'll tell you that, this one is, this one is in the passage most definitely, but this one is, let me find it first. Let me find this, this one first. Okay, so you'll see that, the passage section that relates to this question is in paragraph 3, specifically around lines 25 to 30. So you'll see the key to the jaw speed is that the release comes from stored energy produced by strong but slow muscles. What's the answer? Pretty obvious to me. The answer is J. It literally says the release of stored energy produced by strong but slow muscles. Yeah, so the rest of these are wrong. Obviously, the correct answer, if you know where to find the correct answer, this one's not even worth, thinking about. The author uses the analogy of trying to grab popcorn as it pops up in order to describe the trapjaw ant's abilities to... So where's the popcorn analogy? Well, the popcorn analogy is in paragraph 4. It says Fisher Suarez and other field biologists already noted that catching Obari was like grabbing for popping popcorn, and very hot popcorn at that, because a painful sting goes with the ant's trapjaw bite. Okay, so why do they use this analogy? Well, they're saying, well, the popcorn... Let me look at this one more time. So they're saying that the popcorn right here, is really, it makes it hard for field scientists to catch these ants. And they're using this because, their trapjaw releases the energy like that, and then they hop. And then they go to the next place. And then, trying to grab them is so hard. So what's the answer? Well, they bounce around frantically when intruders approach. Even if they're not biting the intruders, they still, with their trap jaws, they boing, 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 and, bounce around. So it's really hard to catch them. So this is another, this is actually a pretty easy one, because they tell you, and they're talking about the popcorn part of the story. If you read the story closely, you'll know which lines those are on, and then you can, go and read more. One main purpose of the last paragraph is to suggest that unlike their bouncer defense jump, the trapjaw ant's escape jump may have arisen through, escape jump. We're talking about escape jumps here. So the last paragraph suggests the evolutionary point of view, right? So it's saying the defense jump could have arisen out of attempts to bite intruders, but the high escape jumps must have arisen from a different, perhaps accidental kind of behavior, right? So what is the answer here? Well, I just said it. The accidental behavior of the ants, right? If you read the last paragraph well, And if you went back and re-looked at it, then the answer is literally right there. 37, as it is used in line 31, the word domain most nearly means. What does line 31 say? The biomechanics of energy storage is the domain of these two scientists. The domain is, what's the domain of scientists? Well, it's the area of expertise, right? Because, scientists, they all have their own domain or the thing that they study, right? And the area of expertise is kind of, a synonym for that. Not hard at all. That's a context clues one, but, that's not really hard at all. The passage points to which of the following as a characteristic of trapjaw ants' mandibles that prevents the ants from harming themselves. So you would obviously think, if I had such strong jaws that they snap together with a force that's bigger than my weight, then, it would hurt the ants. But what does it say? Well, this is another one of those questions that wants to waste your time by making you look and find it in the passage. But what is, where is it in this passage? Well, even I have to look for a while to find this one. And you wonder, this astoundingly high speed, how does it, prevent the ants from harming themselves, right? So let's look. At the lines right here. So line 50 to 52. It says, they also observed that mandibles started to decelerate before they meet, possibly to avoid self-inflicted damage. Most important, the ants had two distinct modes of air locomotion. This last sentence isn't really that important, but it's saying, the mandibles started to decelerate before they meet, or they started getting slower so that they don't self-inflict damage. So what's the answer? It's pretty easy. It's the obvious one. It's like, this is literally a quote. The answer J is literally a quote from the passage, if you know where to look. Again, this is testing if you know where to look. Don't waste too much time on those types of questions. As described in the passage, one benefit of the trapjaw ant's escape jump is that it allows an ant to, well, the escape jump, remember, we're talking about two types of jumps here. Don't get yourself confused. There's a, kind of a defense jump, and then there's an escape jump, right? The trapjaw ant's escape jump is that it allows an ant to, so where is this? We have a lot of those types of, looking in the passage, trying to find the correct, the part of the passage that supports it, right? And these are otherwise known as time waster problems, right? But one benefit of the trapjaw ant's escape jump is that it allows an ant to, and we're talking about the escape jump. So this is in, lines 65 to 75, right? So what's a benefit of the escape jump? Well, there are a lot of benefits listed here, but one of them is that, it says right here, if an intruder enters the ant's nest, one of the ants bangs its jaws against the intruder, which triggers the trapjaw and propels the interloper. Often the force sends the ant skimming an inch off the ground. The attack, for obvious reasons, known as the bouncer defense. In the wild, gangs of defending ants team up to attack hostile strangers. And then, it's, this escape jump is kind of, hopping it back and leaving it in a position that's really easy for it to attack again. So that's what it's saying here. So it lands it in a backward position, like it's saying a foot back, in order for the ant to launch a completely new attack on the predator. It gives it some time to prepare, a foot, because the predator has to, run that foot. And then, the ant stays there, prepares, and then launches another attack, on that predator. So that's the correct answer. And the last question we have here. When a trapjaw ant uses the bouncer defense jump effectively on an intruder, which creatures, if any, will be propelled either out of the nest or in another direction? This is kind of testing your logic right here. This is a unique question. In fact, this style of question I haven't seen in any other ACT year. But this is a really unique question. If you can get this right, again, give yourself a pat on the back. It says, so which, which creatures will be propelled, which creatures will be moved is literally what it's saying. Well, it's saying the attacking ant pushes the intruder goes backward, and then the ant also goes backward, right? The ant also hops backward a foot, is what it's saying. So, what are the creatures that, move? Well, the attacking ant and the intruder. This question's not that hard, it's just unique. Don't freak out if you see a unique question like this. Just think your way through it, and you'll get through it. Right? The attacking ant and the intruder are both propelled in opposite directions. Opposite to the directions. Remember, it says propelled either out of the net or in another direction. They're both propelled in an opposite direction from the direction they were moving at first. So now we're done with the entire reading test. I hope these 2 days of reading strategy class helped. And again, if you're confused about anything, go back and watch the videos again, definitely look back at the diagnostic test. You can even take the test again to make sure you got everything and you can get a full score on the test. And also, days 9 and 10 are 2 more practice tests for you to go over. Again, only use 35 minutes for all 40 questions, so you can kind of get your ability. And I've posted more material and more like evaluation, criteria for those. If you do a lot better on those, then you'll know that these videos helped a lot. Whereas if you don't do as well on those, or even if you get the same score or a lower score on those than you did the diagnostic test, then you'll know you either need to go over the diagnostic test and those tests again, or you need to watch my videos again to kind of get these strategies again. I hope these strategies are helping. And again, I only went over these in 2 videos, so I hope this was enough. If you need any help, feel free again to contact me via email. And my email is on Joiner English, so on the homepage. So feel free to contact myself or Miss Joiner, mostly myself for the ACT. And I do hope to see you all back in the classroom soon. Thank you very much.